Live from San Francisco on the Sports Byline Broadcasting Network, you are listening to Wrestling Observer Live with your hosts, Bryan Alvarez and Mike Sempervive.
Are you ready? Are you ready? Let's get it on!
Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome to the show. Yeah, I said, how's it going, everybody? It's a traditional introduction for a traditional American holiday that's coming up on Thursday. Thanksgiving. I'm Mike Sempervive here with you, Wrestling Observer Live. All by myself today. Well, Dom's here too, which is like being by yourself in the studio. But boss man Bryan Alvarez is not here. He's somewhere playing Magnum PI. He's got a match with CVAFI coming up. It's all right, though. He's plenty more time for you and I. 1-800-878-PLAY, 1-800-878-7529. On Twitter, I am at Sempervive. Bryan is at Bryan Alvarez, and Wrestling Observer Figure 4, at WONF4W. Also at Sports Byline as well, too. Add that one. Coming up later in the show, the Doctor of Lucha, Steve Sims, filling us in on everything that's going down in Mexico. Mexico? Includes a deal with Alberto El Patron. He's back in the news, although not for what you may think it is. It was actually a failed charity event which took place, an earthquake relief event, at a building that the government had shut down. So we'll talk to Dr. Lucha about that, as well as a bunch of other things that are going on down there as well. Lucha Underground crash and the whole 9 yards, the new Airlux promotion, all that sort of stuff. But before he joins us, I want to hear from you. SmackDown was newsworthy. Didn't feel like anywhere near what Raw had going for it, but it was a solid show, and it does move things forward. So Shane McMahon and Daniel Bryan, obviously that divide is getting bigger, and there was a deja vu moment with the debut of the new women called up from NXT. Want to hear what you think about that, as well as the possibility of a new addition to the women's wrestling calendar every year. Now that all these women are up on the main roster, it does open the door now for a all-women's Royal Rumble. Plus the 30th anniversary of Starrcade 87. That's what's coming up. The end of the Thanksgiving tradition in more ways than one for the NWA. What are your Starrcade memories? All you old people out there unite. Tell us kids how it used to be. New Japan's Tag Team League, Thanksgiving food, Dr. Lucha, all this stuff. Coming up, Wrestling Observer Live. All right, we're back on the show. Mike Sempervive here with you. Wrestling Observer Live. Bryan Alvarez is not here. Laying somewhere on a big rock. Enjoying his time. Happy Thanksgiving to all of you out there. We will not be here tomorrow. I'm not sure if it's going to be a best of show. It would be a very short show that way. So they'll probably just replay one of the days this week. Going to flip a coin. Going to put Dom to work. Actually have him do something. I'm sure he's putting all the work on everybody else to do. Like probably poor Scott, he's making him do like all of the work, and so he can like kind of slide by, and you know that's the type of person that he is. So hopefully, with the sound of my voice, everybody at the byline is going to go, you know what? What would be a perfect job for him is create a best of all Mike Sempervive shows that can air every holiday, evergreen, forevermore. If you want that to happen, let your voice be heard. 1-800-878-PLAY, 1-800-878-7529. On Twitter, at Sempervive. I'm sure Dom's not happy right now. You know who's happy, though, all the time? I'm pretty sure. Ryan in Cumberland, Maryland. Ryan, how are you? Good.
Just have some thoughts on what you just said about the Rumble. I think Ronda Rousey has to be a favorite in such a match if they have a female Rumble. Also, I thought AJ Styles... Wait a second. We're taking one heck of a leap here. Number one, they haven't even announced there's going to be a women's Royal Rumble. But now with all of these women on the main roster, one would think that is a possibility. But I have not yet, Ryan, seen Ronda Rousey called up to the main roster. Are you not jumping to conclusions? Well, she has to be a surprise entrance. You have to make it special. It's be the first one. The first winner has to be a big name. So that would create a lot of buzz for the female Rumble. And also, I thought AJ Styles looked weak last night by not challenging Brock Lesnar to a rematch. Instead, he challenged someone he already beat in Jinder Mahal. And I think more wrestlers might go off script if all that happens is you get put in the main event again and get the win and get another main event next week like Kevin Owens about to do, unless that story was false.
How do you feel about the impending split between what seems to be the impending split between Daniel Bryan and Shane McMahon? Do you believe that's going to help Kevin Owens? Do you believe that's just going to push Daniel Bryan closer and to possibly, maybe in your world, being worked into a shoot and wanting to come back into the ring and being very upset with Shane?
Well, I don't see how Daniel Bryan even helped Kevin Owens last night because he put him in a lumberjack match where all the guys hated him, and it was just pure luck that he won the match because the guys started fighting with each other. So
yeah, but he could have fired him, and he didn't do that. I mean, Kevin Owens got to the point of dropping to his knees to beg to not be fired, and Daniel Bryan didn't fire him. Don't you think that there maybe, possibly, could be something to that?
There could, but it just doesn't make any sense to me because I think I'd rather be fired than have to fight Randy Orton, who's really ticked off at me right now, and then being put in the ring with a bunch of lumberjacks that wanted to kill me. So that seems like him. It's like a death sentence that Daniel Bryan was giving Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn.
Ryan, I want to thank you very, very, very much for the call. Happy Thanksgiving. I don't know. Yeah, I think I'd probably rather be fired than to fight Randy Orton, too. I think. It would probably be. I'm probably losing that fight. I don't know, though. Interesting, though, too. These storylines that they have kind of running parallel on Raw and SmackDown. You have what seems to be a slow build on SmackDown between Shane McMahon and Daniel Bryan and a divide taking place there. And seemingly, depending on what's going to happen, you have Daniel Bryan or Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens being used into that mix. Meanwhile, on Raw, you have Jason Jordan beginning a divide with himself and Kurt Angle that Triple H is a part of. Although that comparison is nothing like the comparison of the women's division, which I'm sure there's probably a reason for this, but they called up, and this was cool, they called up Ruby Riott. They called up, I can't remember her WWE name now, Crazy Mary Dobson. Sarah Logan. They called her up, and they called up Liv Morgan. Now, if you were to look at them and not really know who they are and not really be aware of their accomplishments and know them as individuals, and you just put up a picture of those three women next to a picture of Raw on Monday night of Paige and Sonya Deville and Mandy Rose, well, seems to be almost exactly the same. And they debuted in exactly the same fashion. They went out there and they wrecked shop on someone. And they wrecked shop on a champion by interrupting a match and beating up the champion and a challenger. It's exactly what they did last night. Naomi was the victim backstage alongside Becky Lynch, who got in some good licks. And then, I tell you what, sold the tail whipping she got like a champ. And that's a fact. Becky Lynch is great. And she took that beating and got slammed in the door, and they made a great impact on her. So that was good. And then they went out there and interfered with the title match between Charlotte and Natalya and laid them out as well, too. And we have the debut of these three women on the main roster. And we talked about it yesterday. Who would you like to see? Liv Morgan's name, I'm pretty sure I mentioned it, did come up, although I've been hyper-focused on Billy and Peyton. I think it's an act that could come up now. They're completely fine and content with leaving them down in NXT. And it, again, does not hurt my feelings. Them being in something with Ember Moon or Kairi Sane, especially Kairi Sane, I think that's a dynamic, bullying her or doing something like that. I think there's possibilities there. And who knows if they were to be called up to the main roster, how they'll fare anyway. Although I think they'd fare pretty good. And really, all's not lost. You can see a lot more women debut up on the main roster, including Nikki Cross, because I believe the Women's Royal Rumble will be taking place. This is not a massive scoop or anything like that. This has been talked about for quite some time. So I'm not breaking any new ground here. It just looks as though in the last couple of days that we are closer than ever to having it. And I think that's great. So who knows who could show up on there. But I would love to see Sanity come up Royal Rumble. I would absolutely love to see them come up to the main roster. And I really want to see Nikki Cross come up to the main roster. Because that group, as a group, I think they got something there. And they are in desperate need of tag teams anyway. And they are a big fan now of they seem to be, as the only people that have been more comfortable outside of Mexico with 6-man tandems than WWE has been in the last year or two, has been world class, with the Freebirds and the Von Erichs and Devastation Incorporated. But the New Day has been a good one for them, and I could see, again, adding more 3-person groups and making that kind of the deal. I'm fine with that. So we'll have to see what happens. I like the way the Shane McMahon and Daniel Bryan thing is going, too. One of the things I've liked about Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn is there's always been a lot of truth in what they say. And that's the great part of what makes a great heel, to have some truth in what you say. And I think Shane McMahon's kind of cavalier attitude last night, with leaving the show in Daniel Bryan's hands, I know he's thinking in his mind, things are great. Good job, Daniel. Here you go, buddy. But I can see Daniel going, yeah, you're just throwing the show on me. You got to wrestle. You got your shine, and you got beat up, and now you're not selling the thing, and now you get to go home, back to the hotel room. And now you want me to do your dirty work and fire Kevin Owens when everything is all said and done, too. And I'm not doing it. And I'm pissed. And maybe I am a little jealous. And boom, 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 on down the line. Now, they may not be going in that direction. This could be a big swerve or something like that, but I think Daniel Bryan, whether he is truly joined at the hip with Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn or not, which I think is the thing that makes the most sense anyway, him as a heel going head up with Shane, I think, is something I can get into. Look, the McMahons are going to be the focus of the shows anyway. I might as well get what I want out of this deal, too, and that's a heel Daniel Bryan cutting awesome promos. You should cut an awesome promo, too. Give me a call, 1-800-878-PLAY, 1-800-875-2529, Wrestling Observer Live. All right, we're back. Mike Sempervive here. Bryan Alvarez not here. But in spirit he is. And in operations, we're always here. 7 days a week, Monday through Friday, 3 East. Saturdays, 1 p.m. The Mothership every Sunday, 6 p.m. for 2 hours. A shout out to my man Victor in Gaithersburg. Really appreciate you reaching out to me, fam. Means a lot. Keep repping the DMV, fighting that good fight. 1987. 30 years ago. Go Live at the Cap Center. Because I'm old, I remember that. Still means a lot. That's why Sardines gets played on national radio, because I can. Wait till Go Juju Go comes on. Putting that one in. Stone Cold. All of the old man songs, because I'm an old man. Such an old man. I remember when Starrcade was good. And I don't know how this one Saturday is going to be in Greensboro at the Coliseum. The Revival. Who ironically is not there. It's because they should be. But they're not, because they're always hurt. Although if they were going to come back, that would be good. Although I have no idea where it stands right now with Dawson. I don't. Or whichever one's. I can't remember who's hurt now. The reason why is because I don't watch the other one on whatever WWE's D show is now called. Superstars or Challenge or Velocity or Jacked or Metal or Heat or Worldwide or Pro, whatever the hell it's called. Don't see it. Main Event. It's All-Star Championship Wrestling, Big Time Wrestling, Just Wrestling. That's it. Not just wrestling, just wrestling, like as generic as possible on the screen. Just a black background, white letters, wrestling. Unless you're down south, where it would be wrestling. Put the wrestling on. WCW should have stayed down south, or the NWA should have stayed down south for Starrcade 87. And I don't know if anybody's been following along with Bryan. I haven't been when it comes to 30 years ago on the network. But everybody else seems to be in the Bryan and Vinny show. People love that. They love going back and watching some of that stuff from 30 years ago. And watching some of the stuff from 20 years ago on the network, too. Two dead ends in the world of WCW for me, kind of spiritually. Because Starrcade 87 was... I was a big Mid-South fan, and Jim Crockett Promotions had bought Mid-South earlier on that year, and they had assimilated everybody in. And the one, I guess if there was a good part, was there was basically a UWF-branded show I was able to go to at the Baltimore Arena. I think it was in October of that year. I think earlier on that month was the famous Bruno Sammartino's retirement match, or last match in WWE, where it was Bruno and Hulk Hogan Was it Kamala and the Gang, I believe it was? Bundy and the Gang. I can't remember what it was. Yeah, Bundy. Maybe it was Bundy and Gang, and that was it. But the UWF came to town. And it was like, well, that was cool. I got to see some of those people, even though I'd seen a lot of them before. Kind of cool to feel like I was seeing those guys, and it was something special. But really, it was an NWA show, and the disappearance of Mid-South was really disappointing. And as disappointing as that was for me, it wasn't anywhere near as disappointing as it was for the people of North Carolina, and I guess Atlanta as well, too, but definitely of Greensboro, to lose Starrcade that year on Thanksgiving and to see it go to Chicago. Chi-Town Rumble, where they did basically unification matches between the UWF and the NWA. Sort of. Terry Taylor against Nikita Koloff to merge the two respective television titles. And Terry Taylor, coming out of the UWF at that time, was red hot. Actually, I don't know if he was red hot or not, but the angle that he was involved with Chris Adams and with Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert was awesome. I think I don't know if I talked to Jim Ross on this show about it or if it was with Mike Mooneyham on the old Ringside Rap Radio show, but, I mean, boy, was that awesome. It really, really was. It was really, really good stuff, and I think it was probably the high point of Terry Taylor's career. I really believe that. I think he was excellent. The whole thing went down great, and he was buried. And the entire UWF was buried when they came over to the NWA. Barry Windham and Steve Dr. Death Williams on paper, UWF title, and they blew it. 6 minutes, it was a nothing match. Headbutt in the groin, which led to the pin. I mean, it was so incredibly disappointing. Rock and Roll Express, Midnight Express, and a scaffold match. Been done. The opener wasn't any good. It was a time limit draw. And Flair and Ronnie Garvin, that's a story that's, been told a lot, and Bryan's talked about it a lot. The failure of Ronnie Garvin as NWA heavyweight champion, and I was a big Ronnie Garvin fan. But people didn't buy it. But as insulting as I guess a lot of that was, probably the thing that made it even worse was you go to Chicago, you take this thing and you want to feel like you're big time and you're not just a Southern promotion and you're going to slam into WWE head up and blah, blah, blah. Or Arn Anderson, Tully Blanchard beat the Road Warriors by disqualification. Why? It's never made any sense. Still doesn't make any sense. Go back and see if J.J. Dillon ever talked about it or not, exactly what the mentality was behind that, but it was an incredibly, incredibly bad decision. Incredibly bad decision. And then 10 years later, the only Starrcade I get to go to in my entire life, Starrcade 1997. An infamous Starrcade. And I can tell you what, as somebody that went to tons and tons and tons of shows over the years, I mean, talk about not feeling... It was just a dead, antiseptic feeling. Number one, it was at the MCI Center, now the Verizon Center, which was brand new. And I can say this. I mean, the Cap Center, people can call it a dump and all that stuff. And DC Armory was too small. And the Baltimore Arena, Civic Center, people, there's tons of stories you can make fun of that place. But at least somewhat they had some personality. Opening a new building like that and the type of building it was in comparison to those other buildings, it really didn't have a personality at the time. But that's all right because the company they were hosting didn't really have much of a personality outside of a terrible disposition. The infamous Hulk Hogan, Sting, Count, just, man, 87 and 97 just did not work out for WCW when it came to Starrcade. And, that was the last. Starrcade 97 was, after Christmas. They started holding Starrcade around Christmas time in 1988. So Starrcade 87 was also the last one featured around Christmas time as WCW was chased off by the Survivor Series, which at that point became a tradition and is probably a more impactful tradition to a lot of the fans out there listening now with WWE winning the war and WWE's popularity than WCW ever probably could have been. But go back to your phone calls right now, 1-800-878-PLAY, 1-800-878-7529. Jim in Virginia. Jim, how are you?
Hey, how you doing today, Mike? Got a little Stardom news for you. Read the other day that Io Shirai is the new Wonder of Stardom champion. She defeated Yoko Ito, I believe that's how you pronounce the name. And Yoko is announced her retirement from wrestling.
Now, have you been watching much Stardom? Have you had a chance to watch much?
Oh yeah, I got to keep up with Toni Storm, because that's where she does most of her wrestling, and the different title matches with all the top stars and different ones. Stardom, is where you're gonna get the best women's wrestling. Besides, one thing, Shimmer's good and several others are good, but I just think that Stardom just is a little bit better than the rest of them.
Well, so, have you been able to keep up with Pro Wrestling Eve as well, too, who's got the Ace of Eve tournament that's been taking place? Have you had a chance to keep up with that at all?
No, I haven't, Mike. I hadn't had a chance to. I'll have to check that out.
That's it. There's so much going on right now. I always wonder what, again, everybody's kind of jockeying for a piece of the puzzle, and I think, for the most part, everybody kind of works well with each other, but everybody's still trying to keep their cut of everything. And it's going to be interesting to see how things shake out. Now, Toni Storm, talked about her possibly coming in, and then some things that happened over in Japan. That's a name that I could see would be a great possibility and a name that people would salivate for a Royal Rumble.
Oh, definitely. Toni would be she'd be a big hit in WWE. Now, you was talking about Starrcade a minute ago. I was at the first Starrcade. What was it? A Flair for the Gold? That was 83?
Yes, sir.
On that? I was there, had box seats, on the floor, and I never seen a wrestling show better in my life. Isn't that the one that Gary Hart helped book or booked all the way? Or
yeah, the story with that one was at that time it was Gary Hart, it was Dory Funk Jr., and it was, I believe, Wahoo McDaniel had a piece of that, and with Dory Funk Jr. being the main booker, and the other guys, and Ernie Ladd had a piece of the different states that they ran in. But he, even though Dusty Rhodes gets credit for all the Starrcades and the concepts and everything, that was basically the last show under the auspices of Dory Funk.
Wow, because there was just so many good matches on that card. The dog collar match, the main event with Flair and Harley Race.
Absolutely. Hey, Jim, I hear the music. I want to say happy Thanksgiving to you, buddy. You got Dr. Lucha coming up after the break. And, hey, Steamboat and Youngblood against the Briscoes, too. That was another awesome thing on there, too. Everybody stay tuned. Dr. Lucha coming up. We'll be right back.
You are listening to Wrestling Observer Live with Bryan Alvarez and Mike Sempervive on the Sports Byline Broadcasting Network.
All right, we're back on the show. Mike Sempervive here with you. Bryan Alvarez not here with you. We'll be back next week, unless you're a subscriber to WrestlingObserver.com. If you are, you'll know he hasn't gone anywhere, just off of this show. But he hasn't missed a beat with his shows with Vinny. Or with Tom. Actually, he has missed the beats with the show with Tom, but not with Dave, which is truly what matters, Wrestling Observer Radio. What also matters is the Figure 4 weekly newsletter, to which my next guest is a esteemed writer and a fine panelist on this program. Ladies and gentlemen, happy Thanksgiving, Dr. Lucha Steve Sims.
Even if Bryan is skipping out on my appearance, yeah.
He's like that. Hey, Steve, before we even go on, how do you feel about dual brand women's Money in the Bank ladder matches now that we have all of these women up on the main roster of WWE? Is this something that could work?
I think it could work. I think it could work fine. It's a good, as I have said in other scenarios, a good promoter can make that work. I think that there's a lot to be said for creating new stars and new interest and stuff like that. And you can't have this, as we have learned, you can't have the same crew on top forever. None of the Mexican promotions even keep their same stars. Somebody like a Volador Jr. in Mexico hasn't been on a Bruce Leandis or an anniversary show forever. But so something new and fresh, I think it can absolutely work. And the women certainly have the talent. And it is I don't know what's the best way to put it, but it's the quintessential, or it's a personification of the modern era of more equality, so I'd be interested in it.
take it to Mexico now.
I hear the Buffalo Bills are going to hire a woman for a quarterback because you can't do any worse than the last guy.
That's what a horrible decision. I still look. Tyrod Taylor may not be the answer, but there was no reason to bench him. Anyway, I'm not even going to get into that right now. Kill my friend Rich Fan. End up killing him with hearing that stuff. But Alberto Del Rio.
One day we are going to have to hijack. We're going to have to hijack this segment one week and just talk nothing you and me and talk nothing but other sports. But
I'll be fine with that, too, including lines associated and point totals with all of those other sports as well, too. If I can lure Mike Tenay onto this broadcast to talk to us about that, I would be more than happy about that. I can tell you that right now, because I desperately need the winner and tips badly, folks.
Well,
I do. Somebody got a horse for me, please.
No lines and no odds for betting on Lucha Libre in Mexico. It hasn't gotten to that point yet.
Well, what are the odds on something what's the over-under on how much time between appearances of Alberto El Patron in the news? Because he's back in the news, although a lot of the news that's been around him over the last few months and seemingly years has been a lot of personal stuff, and the appearance of Paige on Raw on Monday night may have reminded some people of that. But he actually talked to the media, along with Octagon and many other guys, about basically what was a failed attempt to run a charity show that was ended up being shut down by the Mexican authorities because of the building. What exactly has gone on with that, and what's the deal?
He did a really good job of summarizing it. There's not a lot of details beyond that because that's exactly correct. That's exactly what happened, and the summary is very close to the full facts. There is a video going around, which I have seen. In fact, there's more than one. I've seen a straight-on shot and then a side shot, and it was covered by Televisa, among others, where he goes into a 2-minute promo, the end of which is a rant about not being able to do a show where the wrestlers and performers are doing it for the benefit of for relief efforts following the September earthquake in Mexico City, which was a severe one. It was not as bad as 1985, but it's about as bad as anything since. It's on that level. And he just went off on it. He was, he was going to be on the show, and I'd known the show was going to exist. He has not been a big draw with the promotions that he's worked with in Mexico City since he left AAA. He's, he's a big name, and he's a big star. And this will actually be a very big feather in his cap for continuing to be a big star in Mexico. But the promotions he's been with are not very good at actually promoting, as far as not the in-ring content, but the actual booking of arenas and getting fans in the seats and advertising and et cetera, et cetera. I thought his speech came across very well. I thought it made all the right points. It was like hitting a panada with your eyes open. He had somebody dead to rights, and he just let him have it. But there was no particular reason why this building had to be only notified, just 3 or 4 hours before or the day of. That was unoccupiable. Why it couldn't have been said. If it was really unoccupiable, did it just become unoccupiable that day? I highly doubt it. It was probably unoccupiable since September. And I'm not quite sure where the fault lies with just finding out ahead of time. And I'm not quite sure where the fault lies with not notifying people and why it couldn't be moved suddenly. But it's a sad situation. It wasn't going to be a big crowd. I don't think it was a big building. I don't think they're going to raise a lot of money. But it allowed Alberto to in a legitimate sense, in a justifiable sense, and nonetheless allowed him to shine his star a lot.
Well, let me ask you, because I when I initially heard this and I saw it was through Twitter, I initially had seen the clips and everything, and then I went to a Cubs fan site, and I had this kind of the same feeling that he ended up expressing where, and I'm going to read the quote here, quote, "This goes down as another strange situation with Alberto. In the U.S., where scandals have seemed to have more sticking power, people are going to see this as another weird Alberto story. In Mexico, Alberto's image in Mexico is still strong enough. People have had issues with the government to believe they're really at fault." Now, with me, my thing, kind of looking at it from Twitter, was you can be a knucklehead or a bad person or whatever it is that you want to say about Alberto, whatever it is, but still be in the right when it comes to this situation. Is this something where, I guess, what is the divide between, is he seemingly completely in the right here, or is there any reason to be pro wrestling wise to think that there's some sort of chicanery or work or dark cloud over this?
Well, if as many have said, if Alberto Del Rio, Alberto El Patron, is involved, he's had such a checkered history. This is, as they say in the movie and play business, there are only actually 7 stories in the world, and one of them is the boy who cried wolf, and he's cried wolf a lot of times before. I suspect in this case he is expressing the truth. I have not seen, and I've not really gone too deep into trying to find it, but the legitimate news coverage as to who is technically at fault for this, and if it's true that the reason that the show was shut down was because the government condemned the building, why they condemned the building just the day of the show is a very strange thing. There's somebody who's lying, and that isn't the real reason why the show was shut down. It has something to do with wrestlers not wanting to work because they didn't get their payments or prepayments or enough money. And even on charity shows, they would get paid something. They would get paid expenses. They would get paid, and Alberto would get a salary, even if it was a lesser salary, for a show like that. That's a possibility, Mike. You never can. I have never gone broke not in the financial sense, but in the news sense of running out of news stories. Promotions doing strange and underhanded things, and I've been following promotions since, I don't know, the 60s, and I was there in Atlanta live growing up when the Gunkel and Barnett monstrous feud happened in 72 and 73, and I've heard stories after stories of the Tennessee, the Welches and the Jarretts and the Tennessee promoters and stuff like that. So I never discount the fact that there's a story behind the story. But in this case, if it is, it doesn't seem to be coming out in the secondary way with all the other sources that we have from other wrestlers.
Steve, just as an aside, did you ever read Chokehold, the Jim Wilson book about that time that was written?
I have read Chokehold. I haven't read it about the last time I read it, 15 years ago, 20 years ago.
That's honestly, it's probably, whenever it came out, it's probably the last time I've gone to it for reference. But that's been it. But has there ever been
him live? I saw his push live. I saw him wrestle live.
As bad as advertised, or as bad as explained by many?
Horrid. He was just a football player, and his gimmick was that he was a football player going into pro wrestling, and he was awful, and he was.
Big superstar for Vince Dooley at Georgia at a time where wrestling's. Well, so, for people that didn't know, Jim Wilson was a guy who was a Georgia football All-American, I believe it was, played for Vince Dooley, was a big name, and, was a guy that says he was promised to push, says a lot of things, frankly, but wrote a very interesting book with Chokehold. But because he has sued so many promoters, there was a lot of interesting information in it. And, I remember Nobuhiko Takada came out with a book, Crybaby, that was never translated into English over in Japan, which I guess expressed really kind of was a surprise at the time, because I guess it really kind of explained a lot of things and pulled back the curtain on some things that maybe people in Japan hadn't seen before. Is there a book, or is there anything equivalent to that in Mexico where, maybe it didn't shake up the entire industry, but it was something that broke kayfabe, or it was something that, I guess, exposed people and I guess made people be seen in a new light?
If there is, I haven't seen it or heard of it. In fact, the number of books that I have seen or heard of or seen of in my visits to Mexico City and my visits to Tijuana my visit to Nogales and poking around bookstores and other things, I haven't seen or heard of more than a couple of handfuls of just books in general. Picture books do well, but stories and histories, this is nothing. I mean, it is the magazines are left as the revistas especializadas, the magazines that cover Lucha Libre have been left to cover the history of Lucha Libre, and there really hasn't been anything like it. Along the lines, there's nothing like an observer. There are people who are on the inside and share emails with each other, but there's nothing that goes out published in a open format, even at that level. So all of this is Mexico is either far behind the scenes or more likely it's just not something they really care about.
You know, it's because we got about 30 seconds or so left in this segment. We'll get into what you got written up in the newsletter this week as well as what you got planned for next week. But I think as we roll into Thanksgiving here, this is a really good time for me to actually say thank you to you and to the Cubs fan and to Chris Zellner and to everybody out there through GIF form or Twitter or their blogs or whatever, writing for the newsletter that, that was a great reminder that, for a lot of us who are casuals who just like to keep up with the main stories in Mexico, there would be no way to do it without you guys. I'm very thankful of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are very kind words.
At least I would have kind words for you, unlike Dom, who was really ripping you at the break. I would say nasty things to him if he rejoins you.
Well, that's Dodgers fans.
He's a terrible person. We'll be right back, everybody. Rusty Observer Live.
Strength. Ain't nobody man enough to feel the pain. And you can be next. You better give respect.
All right, we're back. Wrestling Observer Live. Mike Sempervive here with you. Dr. Lucha Steve Sims here with you. Dominic Jimenez here with you. Getting driven nuts. How could you insult that man by calling him a Dodger fan?
I'm not. I'm calling him a Giants fan. That's the bigger insult.
Take that, Dom. Of course, we've also just got a bunch of radios across San Francisco just turned us off right now in anger. But, Steve, we got to get him back. What do you have coming up in the Figure 4 Weekly newsletter that will get people back on your side again as you write about the world of professional wrestling in Mexico?
Well, for the issue that's coming out this week, it's a coverage of the Legends card at CMLL, the incredible booing of Octagon to his great surprise, the incredible lack of charisma and ability in the main event, and in a general review, it was a memorable show. It was a fun show, but I'm glad you can only do it once a year. For next week, we're getting ready for our Sam Adonis getting his haircut match with Negro Casas, and I cannot wait. I'm very interested to see how CML pulls it off. That'll happen December 1st or 8th, and I am really, really, really excited for that. That is,
yeah. On paper, I hope that this gets some more steam behind it as far as the American side of the ledger goes, because I'm not sure, again, we'll talk about it as it gets close, but everything on paper right now, with the way Sam Adonis has been, if people you haven't seen him, had a chance to see him, and had a chance to see all that goes down, he's been very, very comfortable in his role and done a very, very good job. And it's actually a hair match that I'm looking forward to, unlike most hair and mask matches anymore in Mexico where, once it didn't happen with Atlantis, I don't know. But, Steve, I want to thank you very, very much and wish you a happy Thanksgiving. Dom, wish you a happy Thanksgiving. Everybody out there, wish you a happy Thanksgiving. If you're not celebrating Thanksgiving, just enjoy the day. Hopefully you don't have to work. If you do have to work, call in sick. Listen to a replay of the show. Do anything else but that. Go spend time with your family. Like Bryan is on a big rock in Hawaii. Boy, it needs to be revenge on him. Talk to you on Friday, everybody. Enjoy.